Hey, everybody, Lieutenant Joe here for the Blue Heart webcast. So in our ongoing series of things that we do, trying to help every law enforcement officer, no matter where you serve, to become better at what you do. So we offer tips on training. We offer stories. We also do interviews with people that have important things to say to you to help you guide you through your career. So I was out there looking around, who can I talk to? Who's going to bring value to you, right? And that's really what I'm looking for. And I found Chief, also known as Dr. Ron Camacho. Ron, I've been friends with him on some police connections on social media and this and that. And he just announced that he's writing a new book. And I was very interested in it because I think books can be very helpful to law enforcement officers because we can take, stories that we hear in training are good because, we learn something from it. But when it's in book form, you can go back to it. You can dog ear certain pages. And as you go through your career, I think you'll find more and more times things start to make sense as you experience them. So I want to bring Ron on here and we'll talk a little bit about his career. You get to know who he is and we'll talk about the book and what it's all about. And I think you're really going to like it. So Ron, how are you?
Joe, very good. Thank you for having me on. I'm honored. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's I've seen you out there. We're Facebook friends, and I see all the things that you do. And I'm a trainer, and I'm always interested in brother and sister officers that have something to say to help to add back to our profession. So, Ron, I see here in your bio, right? You're more than 30 years of service. Why don't you give us a little background on your career in law enforcement?
Sure. I started in York, PA, did 18 years, went from patrol officer to captain, right under the chief, ops captain, was a SWAT guy during that time too, 14 years as a SWAT officer, bought some military time, retired, went to Afghanistan as a police advisor, went to Mexico, did a year in Mexico, running a police training division under a State Department contract. That was super interesting. Don't ever supervise retired cops, man. It's the hardest job in the world in a foreign country. So came back to the States after that contract was over, went to Old Dominion University, ran their patrol division for a year. And during that time, I was testing for chief's jobs. I knew I wanted to become a chief. I wanted to come back to PA. In 2016, I was lucky enough to get selected to be the chief of Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. People don't know Chambersburg. It's below Carlisle and west of Gettysburg. Civil War town, population of about 22,000 people, 38-person department. So was there, had great success there, took this department, and we started doing some interesting stuff. And that's really where I started working with the ego stuff and started exploring stuff, started doing a lot of writing, got my master's there, got my doctorate there, and really had a good time there with those officers and started doing stuff, started getting a little national attention. December of 2024, I was selected to be the chief of the North Charleston Police Dept. So I really ramped up. I went from 38 officers and civilians to 400 officers and civilians, 320 officers and the rest civilians here in North Charleston, third largest city in South Carolina. Been a challenge, but really fun also, and really started putting these ideas into play and have had some excellent success and some great buy-in with the officers. They've been very hungry for development and to get another slice of different ideas in policing. And that's where this ego things that I've been teaching and talking about have come in. Very unique, very unique concept, and push a lot on development. So that's my policing career. I'm also a veteran of the United States Army. 8 years, paratrooper, you can see behind me. And I'm a graduate of the FBI NA 239 session.
That's absolutely an amazing career. And when people hear that, when you think about any one of those achievements that you had would be a crowning glory of a career. And you've had multiple of them, which speaks very highly of you. Now, when it comes to leadership, you know, if there's officers out there, your patrol officers, your detectives, your rank and file officers, maybe your sergeant, lieutenant, you're saying, I don't know where I'm going to go. Leadership is probably one of the most important things that we can have in law enforcement. We all know that there are some great leaders out there, and then we know that there are some leaders out there that are less than great. Let's put it that way. So in a recent episode, we talked about toxic leadership and how a toxic leader can damage an agency from head to toe. So one of the things that when you were talking to me about your book, the upcoming book, I'm saying, you know, ego. Well, in the list of 10 things that I gave, I wrote an article for Blue Magazine and I did the show. And one of the things in there is about your ego and how your ego can really damage your reputation, can damage your agency, can damage your officers. And so I think it kind of dovetails, and that's what I was really interesting to have you on and talk a little bit more about it. So what exactly is the basic concept of ego being a problem? How does that fit into what you're writing about and teaching?
Well, Joe, not only am I writing this because I've learned some valuable lessons, but when I was that young lieutenant, young captain there in York, Pennsylvania, I was an idiot. I was an angry, egotistical monster. And it cost me a marriage, almost cost me my life. You know, I could have seen myself having a heart attack. You know, I was so angry every day. I was angry that I could have seen myself putting hands on somebody, or I was at such a level that I could easily see myself swallowing my gun. Okay. I went to marriage counseling, and right away the counselor said, we can't work on the marriage. We got to work on you. And it turned from counseling to therapy, and it saved my life. I went to intensive therapy for about 6 months. It didn't save the marriage, but it saved me, and it changed my whole mindset. So one of the things that I do, I totally, I remove the stigma from therapy wherever I go. I'm very open with my story. I'm very open about trauma, you know, where that anger came from in my life, had to do with some childhood stuff, you know. And once I worked on that and got healthy, it really just opened my eyes. And that was the beginning part. And then I started doing research and reading and started practicing self-awareness, introspection, empathy, and just started working and getting better and better and better. And I'm still working.
Now let me jump in here. As I listen, when I do an interview and I hear things, I have certain things I want to get to, but then as the person talks, things come up that I say, well, okay, we need to explore this a little more.
Sure.
So when I listed in my toxic leadership article and program, I came up with, I researched and I found the traits that we can look at that identify a toxic leader. You're talking about, you had an anger issue, you had a problem, you had potentially suicide. You know, what traits would you see in, what can I look at in me and go, gee, if I have these traits, I need to look for some help, that kind of thing. What's something that somebody watching could say, well, gee, that's my partner. That is my chief. That is me. What are the traits they can look for?
Yeah. So for me, it was, you know, an inflated sense of self, right? Never wrong. Always obstinate towards any sort of change. You know, that's one. And then that constant brewing anger that's there, you know, hair trigger for anger. You know, the littlest things will set you off. You know, everything's a problem. Nothing's ever easy, you know, just difficult to work with. And in that department, you know, we were 110-man department there in York, officers. I ran that department with people that were on my team, which was like detectives and special units, and maybe a couple of people from patrol. So like 20% of the department, we were policing the city, you know, actively. That's no way to run the department. I alienated 80% of the department with, you know, my aloofness, my anger, and just my attitude. You know, I was dismissive of many of them. I was one of those guys that at that time I was 100% go 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 go. My phone was always on. I lived at that police station, and I was a results orientated person, you know. And if you weren't on that team, if you weren't go go go, if you weren't part of that, um, I had no time for you. You know, I wasn't about developing people, you know, having patience. I was about my team of special units or detectives solving crime, you know, and I just alienated everybody else. And again, that's not a way to police a city. That's not a way
No,
to run.
it's not. And that's one of the things that I saw in, I did a juxtaposition of some good leaders that I was with and some damaging leaders. And this one particular guy, he really spoke a good game. He was never very well liked, but he was connected, and he moved up through the ranks. And then right before he became chief, we didn't think he was going to get it, but we knew there was a possibility. And he was talking a good game. I am going to, be transformative. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to really be positive. And then he got the position. And in a short period of time, he told us all, I don't want yes men and women. I want you to be honest with me. And this, until you had something to say that was not exactly what was in his mind. And then you were told, I expect loyalty. And if you were not on his team, you were off his team.
Right.
The people on the team could get away with anything, mistakes, problems, purposeful things. If you weren't on the team, you were held to account for everything. And it really destroyed the agency. It really broke into a couple of different camps, and productivity went down, morale went down, everything was really poor. So it sounds like that was a road that you were on. What was it that pulled you out of it to say, wait a minute, what the heck am I doing here?
Yeah. So going to that counseling is what happened, that marriage counseling. And then right away saying, hey, your anger does not match what we're here for. And having that great counselor and her switching from counseling to therapy, which is way more intense, and starting to work on, why are you angry? Where's this coming from? Identifying some childhood trauma and starting to work on that. And then it was just chipping away at that. And it was intensive. I mean, I used to leave those sessions like I ran a marathon, 2 marathons, And it's funny, to this day, when I go back to York or I meet somebody from that time period, I've always, those bridges were burnt, blown up, and I constantly am going back. And when I meet some of those people, mending bridges, and sometimes they say, yeah, you weren't that bad, but sometimes I'm embarrassed by some of the things I did back in those days, and that reputation that I had, it's embarrassing. And I overcompensate now by just diving into taking care of my people and making sure that I work as hard for them and developing them and making sure I'm the best person for them, the best advocate for them than I was the negative side when I was back then.
That's amazing to hear. It's refreshing to hear. I can see it on your face.
Yeah. I
can see that breakthrough on your face. I see it the way you express yourself and the words the way you're talking about it. As I rode through I was always a fun guy, a nice guy, very hardworking guy. Spent most of my time in the detective bureau, and I just wanted to solve crime and fight crime. And then I had some good chiefs that were just like, hey, keep our town safe, do what you got to do, and we were rocking and rolling. We really became a very progressive agency that, we helped every other agency around us. We worked with the county, we worked with the feds. It was a great time. And then we got this chief that came in, and where you are talking, maybe you had some anger things to deal with. I think this person was inadequate and got into a position that, okay, the only choice I have now is to slam my fist and demand, because afraid of that vulnerability that, hey, maybe I'm not the greatest person in the world. Maybe I did get moved along, whatever. That's kind of the only way I could see it. But I had to make career choices. It came down to a moment, and maybe you'll recognize this. Maybe you were this guy at one time. I had to make a choice as a lieutenant. I got invited into the executive wing now, and here I am. And I would hear what he was doing, and the captains, I called them, the bobbleheads, because, oh, yes, chief, the other lieutenant. And then I would raise my hand and say, but chief, I don't think that's right. With all due respect, this is going to cause it. When you're in charge, you'll make that decision, that kind of thing. And it came down to a career choice. And I remember sitting in my office saying, because this chief came down and he says, listen, you and I are bumping heads a lot. Let's get something straight. I expect loyalty. And if you do the right thing, I can't see you leaving here as less than the captain or the chief. But you better get in line. And he put his hand out to shake my hand to agree. And it was like a scene from the It's a Wonderful Life. And I looked at his hand and I said, Chief, I can't tell you that. I can respect your office, but I have to worry about my men and women first. That's my obligation. And at that moment, I knew I made a career choice that I was going to do right by the men and women that were expecting me to do that as their leader. And there was no doubt about it. My career stopped at lieutenant because of that. But You know what? I sleep like a baby. I know I did the right thing, and I fought a lot of battles. Eventually, the captain comes into my office and says, the chief says, you don't have to come to the meetings anymore. And he thought I was going to be upset. I said, right. Are you kidding? I don't have to go listen to the pontificating nonsense? That's fantastic. Thank you, Captain. Right. Yeah. But you talk about an ego that was involved, my way or the highway. I demand, this, that, or the other thing, as opposed to what's good for the agency. Right. Does that sound familiar in that kind of a personality?
Yeah, definitely. I was about, solving crime, solving problems, and, if you weren't, not everybody is working at 100%. Not everybody can work at 100%. Sometimes you have those people that are working at that 70, 60%. Maybe it's training. Maybe there's a motivational issue. Maybe there's a lack of experience. Right. And now, I know that, hey, I can recognize that. And there's mechanisms to, train, to, put some things in there for motivational type situations or get that experience up. Right. But before I would just ignore, they weren't worth my time. I didn't care about them. I cared about the thoroughbreds, that were producing. And it was a very bad mindset to have. And, now that's no longer there.
Right. Now it sounds like you're reborn. You're born again.
And I was. And it's sad because when I went through that therapy and popped out of that, I wasn't with the agency. I was maybe there a month or two, and then I retired and went to Afghanistan. So they didn't get to see the transformation. They didn't get to experience that. And it probably would have been pretty hard for them to accept that. But, that's the way life is.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. So when you get into the topic here of ego, and now that we have a little more background on you, I can see where these things happen. Where do you think, you may have a lieutenant who has this problem, or a sergeant, right? That's the way he is. That's the way she is. And it's problematic for everybody. What are there any examples that you can give of when an ego got in the way and then how it was overcome?
Yeah. So a lot of that, to me, the big things with ego, with me, it was trauma that turned into insecurity. A lot of times it's insecurity. Those are the big ones. It's either trauma or insecurity, or trauma that causes insecurity. That's why the ego is there. There are other reasons, but those are the big ones. And if you go back and examine, anybody with ego, especially in policing, just think about it. Think of the young cop, right? That's out there on the street, and they have to bluster up. Why? It's insecurity, not enough training, not enough experience on the street, and that's where we get those things, or somebody else. So that's where that comes from. And one time, a friend of mine who's a recovering alcoholic, I was having a problem with a guy, and he told me he's an alcoholic. I had no idea. I don't drink, thank God, right? And I said, how did you know that? He goes, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I can tell a drinker. I'm an ego guy, right? A recovering ego guy. I can tell when somebody has an ego issue. I can see it miles away. And it's that resistance to change. So when anybody's there, resistance to change, resistance, to conform with things. So here, I'll give you one from one of my agencies. Had a guy who, and you said those words, that's the way he is, right? That's the way he is. And you have to accept that this guy wants to come in with a face on, and that, everybody has to accept that this guy, walks around angry, and that's the way he is. Well, number one, that's not professional. Number two, why do I have to accept that you walk around, with a mug on, with a face on? What did I do to you to make you angry? So I had to pull this guy in and basically deconstruct, hey, you have no money problems. Yeah, you have a great wife, great kids. They're, great in school. Why are you angry? Talk to me. Why are you angry? He talked about pressure, the pressure of the job. I said, I'm not putting pressure on you. And I know your caseload is not putting pressure on you. We're not that busy, so why are you manufacturing this pressure, right? And that's that ego wanting to make himself more busier than what he was, which, so I had to wipe that away. And, after talking with him, just kind of saying, hey, I don't care, that's a bad habit and there's no use for that. So we need to stop that. Nobody here is putting you in a bad mood. The citizens aren't putting you in a bad mood. This is, you need to wipe that attitude away. And nobody's pressuring you. So you need to work on that. And I sent them to the psychologist. And I've had great success doing that, getting guys to go to a psychologist, and working with the psychologist. I worked with a specific one who was a prior police officer to start changing that behavior. And some of them, the change was permanent. Other ones, the change was kind of a short time. And if they didn't continue doing the work, they reverted back. Or if there weren't some guidelines in place, some strong guidelines, they reverted back,
Right.
I saw a young, arrogant officer. I mean, just incredibly arrogant officer, tell me, hey, Chief, I didn't have issues with my father like you did, and so he couldn't understand, like he had a perfect life. When we started talking and deconstructing his life, his parents were way older, and he was running the household at like 10 years old, So here's that ego. You were in charge of your household at 10 years old. So that's where your ego came from. Yeah, you thought you had a good life, and maybe it was, but at the ripe old age of 10-year-old, you were running your household, and that's where your ego started, right? Because you were in charge and probably didn't have all the skills to know how to deal with that.
And when you say this, and I'm listening to you, there's something that I've started recently adding to a lot of my training courses. I was enlightened outside of law enforcement by a couple of really, really smart people talking about childhood trauma and how childhood trauma affects every single person to varying degrees, but it's never something we really talk about. You grew up and, hey, you moved on, you're an adult now. But when we look back and we see it, criminals, people that do things negative, people with big egos that cause problems, people that have antisocial personalities, people who have weaknesses, a lot of it comes from the trauma they suffered as children. Now, for me, one of my skill sets is interview. I wrote a book on interview. I teach courses on interview. When I added this component in to understand, if I'm talking to someone now and I'm doing their background, I delve into that. I delve into, hey, how'd you grow up? What went on? Because not everyone will reveal things, but some people do. And if you're listening for the right things, you can hear about that childhood trauma that may be directly related to their adult behavior, whether they see the connection or not. But then it gives you more areas to talk about, right? Because if you can, I call it activating these thoughts in their head. If you can activate that and it comes forward, that might be the motivation for their crimes. That might be the drive that pushes them. So I think, you had mentioned, you had childhood traumas, and we don't talk about this enough in our society in general, but in law enforcement, where we kill ourselves at ridiculous numbers. And we don't deal with those problems either. This is an amazing job. This is a unique job.
Yeah.
Statistically, they say the average person sees or experiences maybe 2 traumas in their life. Cops experience 400 to 800 traumas in their career, and we're human beings, and that affects us. Well, if stuff had happened to you when you were little, you might have gotten past it because time went by, you moved out, you got on, but that doesn't mean those traumas, those things that affected you then, are not still rattling around in your head, causing problems. So I think that has to be addressed in our profession, especially more and more and more. And I also like the fact that you're not afraid to talk about that, because we don't talk about that stuff. We don't talk about those things because cops come forward. They got a problem. Give me your gun. Give me your badge. Now we'll get you help.
Yeah.
Well, some things we might have to take a gun and a badge if there's certain mental problems going on. But if there's other things, we have to find that line where, yeah, you can come forward. We'll get you help. Doesn't mean take your gun and badge.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because that's what a lot of cops are afraid to come forward.
Yeah. And those instances when I sent those guys to go see the psychologist, we didn't take their guns and badges. That wasn't a fit for duty type situation. It was, hey, it wasn't even discipline, right? It was, hey, there's an issue here, and I think that this guy can help you. There's an ego issue here. It's obvious there's an ego issue here. Go see this doc. Go see him for 3 or 4 sessions. Come back, learn some of the techniques he's teaching you. Get in there with an expert, and come back. And we had a lot of success with that. And now here, I'm trying to get, I've got a line item for us to see a psychologist, but I'm trying to start a foundation so that I can get a psychologist on hand so that we can use that technique here.
I think that's great.
EAP is cool, but it's not cutting it, as far as that portion is concerned, and you're right. That's, again, bringing ego to the forefront. We're talking about this. And it's funny when I talk to, when I'm teaching some of the younger lieutenants or sergeants, or even one of my deputy chief, he's like a sponge. I'm always talking about the psychology of things. I'm not a psychologist, but us, we're junior psychologists, right? Because we're dealing with the human psyche all the time, And if you're a boss and good boss, you better know the human psyche. You better know how to properly deal with your people and know what makes them tick, right? And I'm always talking to them about the psychology. Don't look at something at the surface. Ask 3 questions. Go in deeper, and you will probably find the root of the problem and talk about it. And we're seeing a lot of success with that, where they're not just looking at the surface level. We're digging in deeper, not negatively, but with empathy, and that's another tool that I'm teaching and letting these guys experience, which is helping us, take care of our people.
So you should stay in touch with me about this foundation, because we'll push it out to our program here. We'll do a program on it. Tell us a little bit about the book. Now, I know before you told me you have a saying that you use: ego kills careers. Yeah. So what if I buy this book, what's it going to do for me to read the book? What am I going to learn from your book?
Yeah, so the book is going to go into, it's a leadership book, and it's also a self-help book, basically. So for those that think they have a problem with ego, it's going to teach you how to work, many different techniques on how to work with ego. If you don't have a problem with ego, but you want to become a better leader, it's also going to teach you how to kind of connect, different ways to connect with your people. And it's also saying, hey, there are a ton of leadership classes out there, and we in policing, and we're teaching a ton of leadership, but there's a hole in our game, and we're not talking about this. We're not touching this, and we need to start talking about this. And in the future, if we're not self-aware, right, we're going to be left behind, because there's a whole segment out there that needs to needs to connect with us, and we're not doing a good job being self-aware and having that ability to connect with people. So this book will go show you the problems of ego and also give you some great techniques, multiple techniques, 2 different chapters. One chapter on if you want to work on your ego by yourself, and another chapter of things you can do to help your ego with other people, different things. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I studied Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I don't care who you are. You go into a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school with no training, you will be humbled very quickly. That will do something to your ego. I don't care if you're 6'9", 6'8", 300 pounds. I don't care if you're, whatever you are, you will be humbled, and you will understand some humility very quickly, and that will start your journey towards, controlling your ego, So, and there's just different things in there. Introspection, which is a thing that I use tremendously. The ability to look inside and have those deep conversations with yourself and be honest. Have honest conversations with yourself to, be better. Self-awareness is what you're looking at in the mirror, what everybody else looks at. You'd be surprised. And I see that quite often, and not just in my department, but just all around. I look at somebody and I see the way they act, and I wonder if they really know what they look like, to everybody else. I wonder if they really know how ridiculous they are. The words coming out of their mouth, how they're acting, if they realize how ridiculous, how delusional they are.
Yes. There's a question that I ask when I do a leadership program, and I ask them, I say, okay, if I could take your people, put them in a room with no concern about retribution or anything, what would they say about you? If they were honest, what would they say about you as a person, as a leader? What would that group of men and women that you're leading, what words would come out of their mouth? Would it be compassionate, intelligent, visionary, smart, kind, or would it come out ego-driven, negative, one way? How would they describe you? I said, and a lot of times we ignore the negatives about ourselves because, that's just the way I am. It's my strength. It's really not. To lead people, to my opinion, by the way I look at it, I always said the higher you go in any organization, the more you owe to the people below you, the ones that are on the way up. It's not about me being in charge, my way or the highway. It's about what do I do now to help you? What is it that you need from leadership that I can provide? It's not like that pyramid where I'm at the top and they're down there. I look at it the other way. I'm at the bottom holding up that pyramid. What do you need from me? It's my responsibility to do it. And I don't know if you feel that way, but that's the way I've developed into leadership roles.
1000%. It's funny. I'm going on my 10th year of being a chief. I've been here 15 months. I've never worked harder in my policing career as I'm working now. I'm working monster hours. Every weekend I have some sort of community policing event, and I'm happy, because I'm seeing results. I'm seeing these numbers. I'm seeing, the results at the end, and I'm seeing morale high. I'm seeing that, we were fully staffed, now we're down 5. We're 320 officers, and we're down 5, and I've got a bunch of people in the queue. So next month we'll be back to fully staffed. I'm proud of that. And we're not even advertising. That's word of mouth from our people, So those things, those are indications to me that we're doing something right. We just had our promotional process, and we brought in people from outside to sit on these different boards. And the comments that I received from the different ranks saying, wow, who are these people? What did your people do? This wasn't the same group that we saw last year or the year before, and that's because our people have taken this, super serious. We brought in this coaching platform, this development platform called Performance Protocol. Our people have used that extensively, and their scores went up and you could just tell the difference of the people that use this platform to get better, to get developed. Super happy about that, because they're becoming better, more marketable from when they leave the organization. Sending a lot of our people to command schools, sending them lower ranks. Before, command schools were only at the chief level, the deputy chief level. Now I've got lieutenants and captains going to Northwestern, FBI National Academy. So those are the things that make me happy. And you're right, I've had a hell of a career. It's about them now. And when they succeed, that's what makes me happy.
Now at this point, I got to say, I read people. That's what an investigator does, an investigator does. And like I said, you're beaming with this. I can see this second go round that you have going here. It's infectious. And I think other people in leadership should get the book, should read the book, should understand, because there could be things in there that can help you personally, can help your whole agency. So Ron, what is the title of the book?
It's called Bringing Ego to the Forefront, the First Step Towards Ego-Free Leadership.
Outstanding. And is there a website or something people could go and order that, pre-order it when it comes out?
Right now, we're in the very early stages. So if they want, they can email me at roncamacho@bringingegototheforefront.com. I can put them on a mailing list, keep them engaged. And then here pretty soon, their pre-orders will be for sale. And, you order a book signed by me, we can do that. There's other different things that they can do on there. If they want to buy a couple of things, they can get some extra stuff on there. So yeah, we're still in the early stages, but if they want to support, be part of the community, Ron Camacho at bringingegototheforefront.com. That'll go the email. I'll put you on the site, get you onto the website. And and
I'll put those in the show notes. We do this program here on YouTube, and also do an audio version. I have a lot of people that listen on the audio version, and I'll make sure it's in the notes there so that people can get a hold of it. Ron, this was really excellent. I really enjoyed meeting you. I know I've seen you on Facebook, and we like each other, what we're doing and stuff, but this was really awesome. And I think the change to go from where you were to where you are now is inspiring, and it should be for everybody. Leadership at every level. Lead from where you are on the ladder. This can help everybody, and we all need to do the right thing. So I want to thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. And like I said, everybody look in the show notes to be able to get in touch with Ron, get the book, become a better leader and a better person. So Ron, thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm honored for this opportunity. Thank you so much, Joe.
All right, everybody. Remember, be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. We'll see you down the road.